Let's start streaming. Pay no attention to that man.
Tony Caravan.
You've been subjected to a highly sophisticated form of propaganda.
It's just what you need, and not what you don't.
Just what you need and not what you don't. Hey, who are you? What are you doing here? How'd you get in my house?
Quality, quantity, and variety.
ROCKFLUX.
Let's get this show on the road.
It sounds like a really big show. But the question is, it's just...
You're listening to Tony Caravan Live.
It looks like Mutual of Omaha is trying to sell me some kind of death insurance. I bought some coffee yesterday. It says Kona Brew, Kona something. But it says like 100% Arabica or something. I mean, I don't profess to be some kind of coffee aficionado, but I was under the impression that like it had to come from the Kona area in order to be Kona coffee. I don't know. But then someone said that's a type of bean. But like it doesn't explain like what percentage is from Hawaii, as my shirt says. Anyway, the title of this show, and it is a Friday, so happy Friday to you out there who celebrate Friday. I'm calling this 8/27/21 follow-ups and Friday wrap-ups. And by 8/21 or 8/27, I mean August 27th in the calendar year 2021. It's 4:38 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I woke up at 3-something. 4:39 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, actually. Standard Time, I think, comes back November 7th. The craziest, goofiest thing in the world. I'm a clock person, right? Because I do these shows, I do other stuff, I watch things, I don't know. Time things. And I have both digital and analog clocks. And sometimes I wish there used to be a band in the late 60s, 70s called The Association. And they have a song, in fact, I quoted it in one of my books. I took off my watch and I had all the time in the world. Right? That's a really great quote. I took off my watch and found I had all the time in the world. Something like that. Ba 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 da ba 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 da da. I'm trying to think of the name of that song. I have it. I play it. It's in one of my playlists. I know that much. Anyway, the title card for today's show, if you haven't seen it already, you have to have seen it. Well, anyway, the title of this is follow-ups and wrap-ups. And we've talked about different things in the past week. And many of the things I brought up, images from various sources. And some of the images I talked about, they just weren't. It was just I was overwhelmed with images. And so one of the things that was talked about on several shows was the Dust Bowl of the 30s. And so I decided to use these photos, this photo particularly, but I have another Dust Bowl photo, that when we were talking about these people who are fear-mongering about this climate stuff, that they just like gloss over or just forget to mention this, that this is the U.S., like you usually see these things happening in desert countries. You know, like you see this in the Middle East, these big clouds of dust coming, and, you know, or you see it in Australia sometimes. Areas that are just wide open, you know, the outback. And, well, the Midwest in many ways is the outback. And the U.S. has a lot of deserts. You know, that's one of the other misnomers, or, you know, just something that the average person doesn't think, because we have so many city dwellers. And that so many of our, you know, academics are, if they weren't born in cities, you know, big cities, then, you know, they ended up there, you know, they end up spending a better part of their education and adult life in these megalopolises. So even if they were born in the Midwest or something like that, their childhood memories or something long, you know, covered over with the experiences of life. You ever think about that? You know, because I'm a consciousness guy, you know, my last book, you know. Remember, I got a new book that I am working on. It's based upon, a lot of these shows, it's based upon this, I think this year's adventure, which is quite an amazing one. So it should be a very interesting flow of consciousness, partially autobiographical, but just enlightening book. You know, and of course there's stuff you could put in a book that you can't say, or, you know, whatever. And anyway, so the book, now, obviously you want to get codex to understand how this whole idea, you know, what this idea of the hard problem of consciousness is, and where you know, it would be a primer, because that book is a primer. It's a fairly short read, you know. I'm going to see if that light goes on. There we go. That's the jackery. That's the thing that's also making the on-air light go on. And I've talked about this from time to time, but this is a follow-up and wrap-up week, Friday. TGIF for some of you folks. 444 is the number right now. It's 444 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time in the former United States of America. And man, what's going on right now, it really is. So as I was starting to say there, you know, and that's the title of this show. And I have and I have already put up my Happy Friday chat remark. And the thing is, I've got a few pictures to, like I said, that I didn't show earlier in the week. I had the air conditioner on for at least, I don't know, 20. I've been downstairs for almost a half hour, I guess. Maybe 20 minutes or so. I don't know. My chair seems like it's already sinking already. Man. The Incredible Shrinking Man. And I noticed yesterday when I was watching a playback of my own video, which is what I do, because it's like some of the better content on the internet, that this microphone is so directional that if I get over here, you can't hear me. And if I want to take a drink of coffee, I have to make sure I put the coffee down and then bring the microphone close. Because I am the man with the microphone. Let's be a little bit lively today and wake up since it's early in the morning.
Really funny. Really funny.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning, folks. I know the only people who would be tuning in now would be my European friends.
Hello. 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 Hello.
And I happen to have the
Weekend weather.
So let's get to it. I think it's under climate today. And if you look at this map, this is from NOAA, National Weather Service Storm Prediction Center, and it's an animation, rather amateurish one, I must say. But it should get the point across. that you can see that there's the green obviously is precipitation, and so all of those areas will be covered. You can expect rain at some point. Yesterday, it rained late in the day here. I don't know how long. I was going to sleep, and I started to hear it. And I think maybe it was the rain that helped me just get to sleep. Yeah, I'm in here. Over here in the little crack. But you can see the severe weather in the middle of the U.S., the northern central U.S., and apparently there's a particular spot, they've been talking about in Wisconsin and that general vicinity, but you can see the surrounding states as well, where there's the potential for one of those things that like happened in Tennessee. In other words, they could get literally a foot or two of rain. So we're keep an eye on that. And you can see that. So in motion, you can see that that's like, it's not so much stalled, but it's going to be hanging out in that area. So if you're in the former United States, as I call it, you're pretty much, that says it all. Now, in my neck of the woods, the Weather Watch forecast. And I'll keep that up while I talk about my neck of the woods. Currently here in the mid-Atlantic states, which would be, further east of that conglomeration, a little bit south and east, it's 66 outside my studio, they are claiming, and it's foggy out there, allegedly. I haven't gone out this morning. It's dark. It's 4:48 a.m. Sunrise is at 6:38. So literally this sunrise is about the time this show's over. And it's going to get up to 82 degrees here, 66 overnight. And the weekend here, it's going to be in the 80s. It's like Saturday and Sunday are like match days. Chance of thunderstorms, 84 on each day, and overnight it's 70. Next week, it's still looking like it's going to be low 80s, but the nights might get a little cooler. So, in any event, that's your weekend weather. And hopefully you can grasp all of that. But like I said, I talked about the Dust Bowl, and I talked about these things, and I'm not going to get into in depth on any of this, but just to drive the point home, I put it on my title card, and I also have another image. Oh, that's my yard. I hope I brought it up. It's like trying to keep track of all these freaking photos. Is that the image of the day? Yeah, here we go. So let's blow this up. This is the U.S. of A. And it's apropos that you don't know what you don't know stays there in the corner. Excuse me. And as you can see, there's a car, a 30s type of car, and some various other things with wheels that were probably some sort of farming plow type of things. And you can see how basically the sand, the dust, that's why they called it the Dust Bowl, just completely overtook the Midwest in the 30s, right? And, it's really tragic if you think about it. I mean, that picture is crazy. And there are so many. I mean, if you want to go down that rabbit hole, so to speak, I want to get clarification. There's so many things to look up. And the Dust Bowl years were like 1930 to 1936. If you think about it. And, the Great Depression lasted from 1929 to 1939. So imagine this, you talk about craziness. So during, the Dust Bowl happened 6 years right dead in the middle of the Depression. So you talk about a double whammy, you know. And, you know, someone might look at this picture and say, oh, well, you know, that's just like one place or something. No. This was a big deal. It lasted 6 years. In fact, a lot of the movement to, you know, further west and to ultimately California were these people that just gave up. You know, and they just left these buildings. And, you know, there are places in the plains where you can go and you can see like that wooden, you know, building, barn, maybe home with an outhouse next to it or whatever. It's hard to say what it was. It could have been like a barn with a, you know, maybe some kind of animal, you know, thing, you know, area next to it. I don't know. Who knows? I don't know where the house is. But I mean, look at that. Look at the height of how, you know, literally it became a dust bowl and how it overtook. We're talking about a couple feet of like dust and sand or whatever. That's crazy. You know, I mean, it literally is crazy. You know, and this is, imagine watching this come at you. And then at the same time, you know, I mean, you can see that there's houses here, and they're somewhat normal looking houses, 1930s style houses, single family homes, you know, next to each other. If you look really closely in this image, I guess I could, let me take the title card here. Filter. Oh, let's see. Color correction, we'll call it. See if that's the one I'm looking for. Let's see if I can lighten this up a little bit without, you know, taking away too much detail. That's a problem with these things. You know, sometimes you gotta like lighten, but then you don't want to up the contrast too much. You lose the detail of the clouds. Maybe some saturation to give it a little sepia effect. But you can see there's like two guys standing there, and in the background there's a couple cars. I hope you can see that. Let me blow it up a little bit more. Forget about my mug. And these two guys standing out there just watching it. And I guess there's some people in cars who were thinking of leaving that way. And it's like, you want to drive through that thing? And get that caught in your engine? Especially those older model cars. And so eventually, like I said, this wasn't like, you know, it's not as scary as these big, you know, I don't know how many feet high, 100 feet high, you know, whatever they are. They're ridiculously tall. It's not like this is an occurrence you have not seen, because you have seen these things. I mean, you should have. I've seen them, you know, occur, you know, in images from like Australia, and you've seen me like in these desert countries in northern Africa and stuff, you know, or in the Middle East. But the thing is, this Dust Bowl lasted 6 years, right in the heart of the Depression. So it's like, and people think they got it bad, right? And there's people in this country afraid, you know, this like whole generation, like, that are obsessed with like somebody calling them a name or something, right? Or not properly addressing them by something, or, you know what I mean? Imagine that. Imagine living through that. You know, that being a frequent occurrence. and just not ending. You know, it happens the first year and you go, man, that was a bad year, right? And of course, the stock market has already crashed because this Dust Bowl started in the 1930. The markets crashed in 29. That meant the banks weren't loaning these people any money or anything to deal with recovering from, like, 1930. And you're thinking, okay, new year, new years, it's going to be better. You're cleaning up, digging out, and it just stays hot, dust, and it just piles up till, eventually you end up with the, this, not that. Keep putting that up. I'll get into that. That's one of that goes along with the show. I'm gonna climb it. What was it? Title card. I've lost track. I thought it was photography. It was image of the day. Sorry. I have so many images here that it's hard to keep track of them. And so then, I guess, by 1935, 1936, it just looks like this. I mean, these people just left this stuff. I know when I drove out west along, even with like Route 66, which has nothing really to do with the Dust Bowl necessarily. But it's like there were these abandoned, when the new roads came in and Route 66 was just, one day it was no longer the main route. You used to run from Chicago to LA. And there were these diners in different places. I think I pulled out, I have some images I showed on one of my shows. I held them up. I haven't digitized them yet. They were like prints. But you look in the windows of these places, these diners in different places, and they were still like set, It's like they tried to hang in there. For some reason, I was just getting a little bit of a spinning. But I have an excellent connection. But for some reason, not for some reason, it's like they waited out to the last minute. So the table still had the salt and pepper shakers and placemats, and you could see on the counter the coffee pot or something. Plates and stuff were still there. Nobody disturbed them. That's at least on my trip, when I took my California trip, as that song goes, get your kicks on Route 66. A friend of mine's uncle wrote that song. He was like staying, when I lived out in Malibu, we had a guest house, and he stayed there in the guest house for a while. I was going to like co-produce a show where we were going to have all the people who had recorded that song and, do some kind of extravaganza about it. But we never got too much past the planning stage on that. But yeah, so that's part of the title of the show, the follow-up. I didn't get a chance to show you those pictures. And we could go through hundreds of pictures, and you could find in the Library of Congress, and there's really some classic photos. But when someone tries to tell you this is the worst drought in history, or this is the hottest weather in history, just remember, say, well, what about the Dust Bowl? And that lasted 6 years, not one day or one summer or for a little while. And people lost everything. And that's the part I just don't understand. How, people, they call them academics. But I mean, is your job so important to you that, your lifestyle and you're so afraid of of just telling the truth. I mean, can't you be like that article I had up from what's his face, which I'm not sure. I think I still have it here. Yeah, I'll put it right on top of it. You know, I talked about this one yesterday. See if I can get it to enlarge so you can read this. This is a hospital review. This is an actual, this is medical information site, as you can see, even the ads. And so, this guy, I'm not going to mention his name or the name of the thing because it's right there in your face. But it's like how people were afraid to talk about this for a year. And imagine how many thousands of people probably died because of this, or were hospitalized and went through all kinds of misery. And now finally, this White House chief medical advisor, August 24th, just this week, said that antibodies are a much underutilized intervention for the thing. And he encouraged hospitals and physicians to make greater use of the therapy. And down there, it says, if we skip down to where it goes, and then he goes, Regeneron's antibody cocktail is also authorized for use in preventing infection in people exposed to the virus. And in quotation marks, bottom line is a very effective intervention for the thing, the guy said, who you all know and you could read. It is underutilized, and we recommend strongly that we utilize this to its fullest. Now, this is, like I say, this is follow-ups this week, this show, and wrap-ups. Okay? And so at the same time, let me get to the right one. This is a quick glimpse at, I often talk about how they put up the news on YouTube, right? This is YouTube. This isn't me. This isn't like I didn't put these little squares together or anything. This is what Google or Alphabet or YouTube, however the company wants to be referred to. This is like this morning when I just opened up YouTube and this stuff just comes up. And I don't even do research on this. So this is what they call push technology. They're just pushing this. In fact, the first one actually uses the word companies push to get. But they just push this information. And you can see these are all major networks, right? And when you take the last image I had up, okay, what this guy is saying, 2 days ago, 3 days ago, this week, about preventing hospitalizations, and it is underutilized, and we strongly recommend that we use this to the fullest, and that this Regeneron antibody cocktail is authorized for use in preventing infection in people exposed to it. And this whole idea of once you have those antibodies, you are basically better off than what that top row of YouTube is like pushing. Right? All you have to do is because, then what else came out this week? That the thing they're talking about here has been reduced to a 60-some% efficacy rate. Which means that, well, kind of make it, draw the conclusion yourself there. Look at that. These are, talk about matter of factual documents. And then just also, while I'm on this thing, just to follow up, you can see down there, Bright Sight Insight. In the next row down is Bright Insight looking at Peru, in Peru. And I recommend you go checking that thing out, just to go into this is something else I touched on this week about. He was talking about there were some sites that they just don't allow people to go to anymore. Right. But beyond that, that's my thing. This is just, this is kind of semi-incredible, that 3 days after this, 3 days after this, which is like outrageous. They're still pushing this, and remember that this was like now lowered by the CDC to only a 60-some% efficacy. And that's why the last two on the far right side are saying booster, which basically just means more. It's like I talked about that Robin Williams movie. Remember, it was based on a true story, and it was about these people, Awakenings. Did you ever see that movie? It was kind of a big movie at the time. And there were these people that suffered from this disease where they were like frozen, And so what he did was he was just giving them basically like cocaine. Is basically what it was, like some kind of coca plant derivative, but it was basically cocaine. And he had given them, was working and finally got to a high enough dose that these people who had been frozen for years, right, since, that suddenly they became totally like awakened. That's why they called it Awakenings. And they were out. In fact, one guy went home even. But then after a time, they started to revert back. And so his answer to that was, and it was that part of the scene, I thought that was very foolish. It like showed him in the lab as if he was doing something. But all he was really doing was giving them a bigger dose of this cocaine type of thing. That's what it was, like this coca plant derivative. And that reawakened, woke them up for a while. But then eventually they went back, and the movie ends with all them frozen again. And so when I look at this thing here, and particularly the last two, title cards, YouTube title cards, isn't it the same thing? They're saying, well, first one now is like we've got this this dwindling efficacy rate, so let's just give more of the same thing, because that's what it is. That's what I have seen that be talked about openly on the major media. All they're doing is giving you a bigger dose. So it's like that movie Awakenings. But they still won't want, but because of the lobby of Big Pharma, they're just ignoring this, even though this came from the king, right? The White House chief medical advisor, Mr. You-know-who. I just don't want to say these names because, even though this is matter of factual now in public record, and what you're seeing here is his actual quotes, right? So you understand the absurdity of this. So I just wanted to follow up. Like I say, I want to follow up with these things because, there's still people out there that watch this program and, sometimes they're thinking, well, and it's like, it's never enough. But it's like I can only dig out and search for so many photos and images and sift through news articles and press releases. I'm not getting paid for this, and none of you blokes are buying anything to even like throw me morsels, enough to buy coffee, right? So it's like, but it's Friday, so I figured I'd spend a little time. I got up at 3 a.m., 3 something or other. And I thought, okay, well, I'll go the extra mile and I'll dig out some stuff. And so like, and I thought this one is interesting too, and this is Google News. Like I like to keep things, so that there could be no question, right? This is right out of Google News. And you see, if you look at the top of this, these are like the news headlines that you would supposedly click on. But people don't click, that. This is like they get the news and the talk, and then they talk and tweet by just whatever, they see is pushed at them headline-wise. So that's either pushed at them, via one of those, title card YouTube-y things, or it's pushed to them on their smartphone, or like in Google News. But again, like I always say, I only ever tell you what my experience is firsthand, or something that comes from accepted sources. Like, in other words, this is Google. So you see they still have the thing at the top under the word headlines on the right-hand side. And, and you have to click to go see stories on that. So they're already downplaying that. And now they're getting into, the horror of this Afghan tragedy, Afghanistan tragedy. And they can't help but keep that name. Biden-Trump camps play blame game as situation in Afghanistan continues to deteriorate. But the point of the matter is, Trump isn't the president anymore. But, they can't, like, why are they even putting, you see what I mean? So that number one is like bizarre. All right. Why can't they just say Biden plays blame game? And I don't want to get politically here, but see what I mean? How they do this. They hide their partisanship. Anyway, and then it's like Biden promises to hunt down terrorists behind devastating Kabul attack. Now, good luck with that, man. These people are like ghosts just going to disappear into the shadows. And unless you plan on restarting the entire war and getting that urban warfare thing happening again, you're not going to find these people. And then what about was it AOC or all these people that are saying, oh, let's bring in like 200,000 refugees from there. Now, we know they opened up the prisons, all this stuff. And the thing is,
Your papers, please.
if you want to go to a New York restaurant, that's what the guy at the door says.
Your papers, please.
But if you want to come from, Afghanistan, nobody's asking you that. You don't need a passport or anything. And so, so what are we going to deal with? Al-Qaeda and ISIS people coming over here, sneaking in? Of course they want to. They already claimed responsibility for the attack yesterday, And you notice that in the headline, they didn't mention that. Okay? Even though that came over, that was pushed to my phone. You know? Yahoo News, McMaster. What we saw today is just the beginning, you know, and everybody loves Yahoo News. NBC News. Afghan airport explosion happened under Biden, but traces back to Trump. The explosion happened under Biden, but traces back to Trump. How? It's August. It's the end of August. It's for practical purposes, it's almost September. 9 months, eight months later. So do you understand the absurdity of politics and why I've given up on both sides? I'm just, like I said, in this instance, I have to, you know, you got to look at the absurdity from one point of view, but it's like something that happens 8 months after a guy's out of office traces back. They were terrorists. They should have never been allowed out. It was a clear blunder. All right. You know, the Dementia Joe's on record saying that there wasn't going to be a problem because there were 300,000 Afghan government troops fully equipped, of course, with all our latest U.S. military equipment, which is now in the hands of terrorists. Two different, the old ancient terrorists, the original ones, the 9/11 terrorists, the new iteration that we wiped out in the Middle East, and of course the Taliban, which have always hated the U.S. Well, whatever this Kona coffee is, it is a little bit better. It's definitely better. And 100% Colombian coffee is usually good stuff. But I hear Ethiopian coffee's good too. But you see how, why politics is such a stupid thing, and whatever side, this idea of choosing sides, red team, blue team, red state, blue state, left, right. At least this stuff has pushed everything else out of the way, so we're not black and white. They're not trying to put, separate us by color. That was the most ridiculous thing they were doing last year. I mean, all this stuff, it either has to do with an election or it has to do with the corporatocracy making money. In this case, like in the case of that thing, it's about big pharma making more money on these things, right, than allowing this stuff given to people, because a lot of these things have no patents. The patents have run out. It's generic. Your doctor can prescribe it. Hospitals have access to it. Or you don't have to go to the hospital. Your doctor could, prescribe this treatment, right? The bottom line, quotation marks. The bottom line, this is a very effective intervention, said the White House chief advisor, is underutilized. And we strongly recommend to utilize to the fullest. It's authorized for the use in preventing infection in people exposed to it. For crying out loud, a year ago, they were denying that. So you don't know what you don't know, and everything you know is wrong. And I'm keeping this Dust Bowl picture up from my title card because that also shows the other part of it. You know, when you look at all aspects of everything we're being told today, everything from Afghanistan, you can see how they're warping that news, blame game and politics and politicizing it. Meanwhile, people and troops are dying. See, they don't care about that. They're just looking for the image of it, the politics of it, right? You know, and of course the military industrial complex is like, you know, is jingoism through the media. It's like, yeah, okay, great. We could like sell more ammunition, send over more $1 million weaponry, you know, get this thing going back up again. We want that. We want our 100 billion. And then the people pushing for the jab and stuff. We want to keep this 100 billions coming in. Forget about that antibody stuff. Right. And then these climate crisis people, you know, fear mongers, I guess the reason they're denying, you know, revising history and ignoring a dust bowl and the Santa Ana winds and that California is actually a desert, right? And that fuel oil I talked about yesterday, bunker fuel and stuff, is because they see money that they could be making. See, this is just one big corporatocracy. It's like, show me the money, that line from that movie, follow the money. And to think that we've gotten to this point, man, is that a sad situation. But anyway, I want to, you know, and we'll continue on some of that stuff, but I have some other stuff here. Let me take down the title card. Like I say, part of the title of today's show is, you know, follow-ups and wrap-ups, right? And so I had talked about, like, this is a portion of my backyard. I told you how it was split with a concrete path. My lawn's not mowed there, you know. But this is the back portion of my house. And these are grapevines. And if you look like in the center of that picture to the far right, I built this thing like pergola type of thing for the grapevines, but it's decided to like completely cover that over. And then it's worked its way up to the second story of my house. Isn't that crazy? There's a little fire pit I made, which I happen to have a grill top that could also fit on that, even though I have a grill elsewhere. And that little contraption, that white contraption with the bucket under, is like a thing I built out of an old foldable table I talked about once that allows me to, you can see the mountains in the distance too from where I live. That's a place where I can wash my root vegetables. And that little soap, that's one of those, that Myers type soap. It's that environmentally. It's soap that comes out, so it's like with people who have gray water or use it. You know, it's biodegradable, doesn't hurt plants and growth. But look at these leaves. You can also see one of my security cameras there that I end up having to put out because can't trust people in this world. But that's a follow-up. I had talked about that, as well as this. This is that white building, cinder block building there. Look at the beautiful blue sky, though. See that? This was just yesterday I took this picture. This is one of the apple trees I was talking about that I built, or that I built. Yeah, built it. Well, technically, I guess. But I planted from a seed. And if you look closely in the bottom, you can see how thick, you know, basically it's becoming. I mean, it's not a huge tree yet, but it's about 10 feet tall and growing and hardy and healthy. So I won't have apples this year. It takes a couple of years to get apples. It takes like up four, it's like this is about the 4th year. So I'm pretty sure next year I'll probably get apples, some apples. Maybe only a couple dozen. But here's hoping they're not like crab apples or something. I hope it's, good apples. But it's a follow-up. There's some zinnias barely visible in the bottom there. But like I say, yesterday was like a blue sky day. There were some clouds up there. I was out. Like I say, I'm in black and white right now, so you can't really tell. But, I got my tan back to where I wanted it. Which is basically, just the symbol of getting that vitamin D3 into your system and boosting your immune system. I think I'm going to take this. I got this cone of coffee in this bag, about so big, like those coffee bags if you're a coffee person. And I have this big can of 100% Colombian coffee. And I think what I'm going to do is just mix the two of them together because there's only about less than a third left in that coffee can. But I think, because this is a hybrid, I put like a scoop of Colombian in and then I put a couple cups of this, or spoonfuls, teaspoons, or tablespoons, I should say, heaping tablespoons of the Colombian, of the Kona. But I talked about this and you could see how the vines... In the previous picture, we saw the vines going up my house. Now this is heading towards the back here, and you could see there's a fence between me and this doctor's office. You can't really tell, but there's probably about a length of 2 cars. I don't know, about 14 feet from my fence to that cinder block wall, which is the doctor's office. So it's somewhat it's privacy, because sometimes some of the nurses park there, but that's about it. You never see them. And further back in my yard, I don't have a picture of it here right now, but it's shown in my videos, is where I have my little patio and little mini greenhouse. But I talked about this apple tree that I planted from a seed, and look how big it is. And this is just to reinforce this idea, getting back to the forest fire craziness that they're talking about, is how I was trying to say that those fires are a natural thing to open up the canopy to allow for new growth, and how quickly things grow. At the beginning of this year, okay, in other words, in March, which would be the beginning of the growing season, right? March, April. Sometimes later, but around that time, some things start plopping up. Cooler weather things. Say April. That fence you could see through. And that apple tree had no leaves on it and was like short, probably. You see how that building next door is kind of tall, but the back part of it's shorter, where you can see the blue sky. And you can see like a little house top on part of it if you're looking at this on a bigger TV or something. Well, the top of that tree probably barely went over that lower portion of the roof. So that's how much growth there was. And what I'm trying to get at is that all this growth, once you open up the canopy in the forest, and that's what forest fires function are. They're a natural occurrence. Lightning causes these things. Hot Santa Ana winds make it the way it is. Things dry out. It burns all the brush and the dead trees, and it opens up this canopy. The sunlight comes in, and then new trees prop up, and they grow really fast. If I had a picture of the other side, they'd see that maple tree I talked about is about as high as this apple tree I planted. And so it doesn't take long, just in the matter of a few years, and that's how it is. The forest just renews itself. So, I'll make sure I got everything that we talked about. But look at that, man. Isn't that crazy? America. Yeah. That's not some... That's crazy. And like I say, they had some great photographers, who took these classic pictures like the one here. So, in fact, I think this photo is credited to the USDA, U.S. Department of Agriculture, like, because, this is the breadbasket, So, people, they put these warnings out, watch out for food shortages, it's been a bit of bad droughts and in the growing, farmers struggling, blah, 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 and stuff. And the point is, this happened. And it lasted like 6 years. 6 years, man. And this was a time when people, like right after this, people were growing what they called, because after this, we eventually got into World War II a few years later. And Roosevelt was calling for people to plant victory gardens in their backyard. They called it. Which basically is kind of the thing like I have. Which is like, I've got so many tomatoes. I pulled another squash out yesterday. I've got kale growing still. I just put in chard. So that'll grow right in through October up, And like I said, I've got potatoes. I pulled some potatoes out and carrots in the ground still. Peppers. And various herbs and things. So it's, it's like you almost don't have to go shopping except for like condiments, like if you're cooking oil and stuff, olive oil. Things like that. I mean, that soup I showed yesterday on yesterday's card, like I said, was basically, 90-some% from my garden. And so what happens is that, even despite this craziness here, people don't realize it's so easy. Just grab some seeds, man. And plant. And, the funniest thing about it is I'm getting tomatoes now from plants that I started and let grow in my back porch, which is this tiny porch. It's hardly even called a porch because it's closed in, but it's ice cold. So I have one of those little radiator heaters I put in there, portable heaters, and a grow light. But very minimal electricity use, and it just barely, it doesn't take it up to like 80 degrees or anything. This damn chair of mine just keeps shrinking. Incredible shrinking man. I'm going to have to like buy another pad, like chair pad to just in other words, put it down at the lowest setting and then just let the thing, and just build pad up so that, I don't have to worry about raising it anymore. In other words, it's raised by a series of seat pads or something. Craziness. Yeah, so, man, I'll tell you, it's weird. I don't know. I don't know what to say.
You're listening to Tony Caravan Live.
So in one of my shows, I said, it's a world gone mad. But everything happens, I always talk about cycles, and I didn't even get into any of this catastrophe theory, the idea of the sun. But, this is 90 years ago. The Dust Bowl's 90 years ago. If you look at the economy, it's even with if you talk to economists, even with the concept of markets, cyclically, markets rise and markets fall. And the only reason we haven't had a depression, which they called it the Great Recession, of 2008, 2009, that time, too big to fail thing that happened, really just, 12, 13 years ago. But the Fed, they cheated, and they created this thing called the plunge team or whatever it was back in, I don't know if that was under Nixon or Reagan. I think might have been Reagan. Could have been Nixon. You buy stocks. If the market was sliding down, they would intervene. And people wouldn't know. And I think the plunge protection team, PPT, and I think I don't know why I'm getting a spinning on it says I have an excellent connection and kilobytes, but I keep getting this YouTube spinning thing every now and then. What's going on? Everything seems to be somewhat normal. If you're experiencing any freezing, stay tuned because sometimes this stuff happens. It says error, YouTube is not receiving enough video to maintain. But that's simply not true because just hang in there. Because according to this, I have a low CPU usage. I'm pushing 30 frames per second and my kilobytes per second are high enough. So if it's spotty or if I'm freezing up, if you can hear my voice, hang in there. I think they're just having a problem maybe with the subject, the content matter. Maybe they're messing with me. It's kind of weird. The clock is still ticking and everything. I have no idea what they're doing. Well, I'm going to keep pushing. Yeah. Right.
You're listening to Tony Caravan Live.
YouTube is not receiving enough video to maintain. It's totally weird. I've got nothing opened. Yeah, this is a real eye opener. You know what I mean? So I don't know if I'm being played games with, it's trying to get me to go off, or if you can't even. I might be talking to nobody right now. Stream health. Let's see here. Error. YouTube is not receiving enough to maintain a smooth stream. As such, now it says stream is healthy. Excellent connection. Well, for those who stay tuned, yeah, that was really weird. Apparently, I was getting no data, error, and now stream is healthy. They just don't want me. It's it's bad enough I have no viewers, but it's the idea I have so few viewers that does it really matter? And all I did today in today's show was show you Google, news and medical and news, like sources, major sources and quoted major sources, matter of factual stuff, right? Then I showed you some firsthand things from my backyard. No make-believe, conspiracy theory, giving no weird advice, just the truth. Like I say, at 30 frames per second. I don't know. See, maybe you didn't even notice anything on that on your end. But do you understand that it's tormenting me on my end? And that there might be other people that would have seen that and would have panicked and just stopped and said, oh, I guess I'm not broadcasting, and would have stopped their thing. So it's either that or you witness some kind of like me freezing up and cutting up or something weird like that. Either way, it's messed up because all of my statistics, in other words, my upload speeds, my CPU, my frames per second, my internet connection, everything, went against what their analytics were saying. So they just mess with you. I don't know. So like I say, it's a world gone mad. And the idea that there's such an effort that you don't know what you don't know, but really it's everything you know is wrong. I used to say everything you know is mostly wrong, or most of what but I'm going to stick with that. Get that shirt, TonyCaravanLive.com. Everything you know is wrong. Get it on a hoodie. Fall's just around the corner. Wear that. If you're the type of person that doesn't want to, get vocal with people, and nobody seems to talk to each other anyway, and, people are just walking around with a covering over themselves anyway. But have that thing on your hoodie as you walk down or wherever you are. Or you don't know what you don't know. Communicate that way. Let that play with their little indoctrinated, propagandized, conditioned, programmed, subconscious, jello mold brain. Right? It's much easier than getting, into an argument with somebody or trying to convince somebody of something. It's like, I'm not here to convince anybody of anything. I'm just showing you stuff that nobody else is showing you. But back, the concept of this is that with all of this craziness that they're fear-mongering about the climate crisis and CO2 and all this stuff, we didn't have a dust bowl for the last 6 years. We've had some high temperatures. And then they're saying, oh, storms. Yeah, we've had some storms, but they've had storms, in the past. Bad ones. There have been forest fires. They're lying about that. They've been forest fires since the beginning of time. Nor'easters, floods. I showed you the Johnstown flood 3 times. One time it killed 2,000 people in 10 minutes. Worse than anything we've seen this year on network TV that they just, kept looping and kept playing to make it look like, oh my God, it's the end of the world. I mean, nobody's really talking about the psychological damage they're doing to children and to older people. I mean, there's got to be millions upon millions of people who are scared to death who watch TV. Right. Or have some lunatic high school teacher, grade school teacher, or, college professor who's like just freaking them out and not, and just won't sit there and have one show where they have a slideshow presentation, especially college professors and people, and just teachers in general, because they have access, much greater access to all of this kind of stuff. they've got access to the books, the photos, all kinds of information, all the archives. I mean, there could be a class, you could, and there probably is somewhere, but I mean, considering the Dust Bowl was 6 years long in duration, I mean, that could be a whole college class on that. And every day they could have a slideshow of different photos. There's literally thousands of them. But I don't want to get, I'm not going to harp on that. It's like, I just wanted to, these are a lot of things I talked about this week. And I just wanted to make sure that, we covered it, so that for the few random people that tune in and tune out, they say, oh, that guy's full of it. He doesn't know what he's talking about. It's like, yeah, I know what I'm talking about, and I always present the actual facts, and I never go to any like weird sites like some people do. I mean, some people present, see, there's fear mongers, all over the place, right? There's fear mongers about, this CO2 man-made crap who ignore the Dust Bowl and just the sun's effect on the climate and our weakening magnetic field. I mean, you could find those people everywhere in as high as college institutions and all that, and the UNIPC and all those. But then you got other lunatics who are out there just saying the most outrageous things, and they can't back them up either. But I don't do that, man. I go right to the sources, right to the facts. I want to see the photo like I'm showing you here now. I want you to see, this and say, that's America. That happened. And this is just one of I could just sit here all day long and just bring up more images like this. And there's people telling you, oh, this is the hottest weather we've ever had. Well, is it that? Is it like my title card here that's on the screen? No. Okay, well then shut up, man. You don't know what you're talking about. And that's the same with this. I mean, come on. Bottom line, look where the Mystery Science Theater people are pointing. Bottom line is this is very effective and underutilized. And we strongly, recommend strongly that we utilize this to the fullest. I mean, come on. And yet, at the same time, this is the thing. They're pushing. Awakenings. Let's just give them a higher dose. First one's only 60% efficacy, maybe less. People are shedding it, getting it. So let's just give them more, like in the movie Awakenings. Yeah, right. It gets you a feeling, with this idea of the functionally illiteracy, those studies that the government has done through testing and said graduates are functionally illiterate. Well, those people have gone on to graduate school and have become professors and, teachers now. So you got the functionally illiterate teaching people. So, in other words, it's more functional illiteracy, is becoming like exponential. So when they used to talk about years ago, decades ago, the dumbing down of America, right? That's very old thing. Decades ago. It was in my first book, which I don't know if I have a copy of Here. It was a book I put out. It was more of what they call library binding. So I don't really count it as one of my, I have 9 books for sale on Amazon right now. After this year, I'll have 10. But like I've said before, technically I wrote 10 or 11 books because there was another digital book in there, and there was an original book that was short library binding book I put out. And that was the first thing. But I've kind of combined a lot of that stuff into these 9 books. So after this year, when I put out this 10th book, that's going to be my collection. I don't know if I'll write a book after that. I think this will be the last book. But technically, I would have already had 11 books out. But in that first book, which was 2 decades ago, I wrote that. I think the lead in the first essay, chapter, whatever you want to call it in that book, was the dumbing down of America. And obviously that didn't happen upon me. That was based on an essay I had written earlier in the 90s. And I think I published that thing late 90s, that booklet. I still have a handful of them here, but it's out of print. Just, unless you got one from me, you can't get, they don't exist. And so think about that. So, it was already pretty obvious and being talked about in educational circles, right? Academic circles, in government's agencies, the dumbing down of America. It was something that was known. From test scores and things of that nature. They kept making the test easier and easier so that people were taking the, SAT test and things like that. And so that they would get scores high enough. And none of us knew this at the time, but the whole purpose was that they were building up to this where colleges were to be, become part of the corporatocracy and to become big businesses. So that people would have student loans in the tens of thousands of dollars. So college became a revenue stream and a way to put people in debt. Because you're in debt, remember, you're in debt, you're in fear, then you're more susceptible to control, manipulation. This is basic psychology. You go back, a century, and that's how some of the great dictators, that was their formula for controlling the masses and doing those horrific things that happened in the 20th century, early part of the 20th century. So those people were dumb. So people who went through the school systems back then, who then went on to become teachers and taught this generation in the 21st century people who are now graduating or in college or just have graduated from college and high school, whatever. They were taught by a generation that was already dumbed down. And history was already revised in many instances. So the things, in other words, it's like what some people talk about is lies of omission. It's just as bad as telling a bold-faced lie. If you leave out a key thing, well, that's a lie by omission, because the person, you give the person an impression about something that they don't know. So if you don't if you don't question a thing, or you don't teach the Dust Bowl, if you don't teach about solar cycles and grand solar cycles, or the magnetic field weakening, the migration of, I'll just, to say it again, the South Pole, the magnetic South Pole, because the poles are just imaginary. Remember I brought up that picture. I mean, you have what we call axial tilt that gives us the sea, the earth like is on this, wobble type of thing. But I mean, and it goes through the precession of the equinoxes, is that that imaginary axis. There's no pole through the middle of the earth. There's no North Pole or South Pole. I mean, they actually physically put these things there. It looks like a barber pole at the South Pole. I think I showed you a picture of that already. But it's the geomagnetic, we call it the North Pole. And this is how birds and bees and certain animals, navigate, they believe. And certainly, people in the past in ships and stuff used a thing called the compass. I have one here myself. Where is it? I don't know where my compass is, but you know what a compass is. Points north, right? Points, tells you where south is. So the magnetic South Pole, okay, which is supposed to be in the center of Antarctica, right? South Pole has actually migrated, is no longer even on the continent of Antarctica. What's that noise? Oh, it's my thing in the back. So when was the last time somebody... I'm just turning that thing off. When was the last time somebody told you that? And the North Pole, the magnetic North Pole, right? Because like I say, it's all just based on this axis, imaginary axis that we use to show how the axial tilt, they call it, of the earth and how the seasons, how we point, this direction. And then ultimately, like I say, it kind of spins over a cycle of like 26,000 years. Right? And they call that the precession of the equinoxes. Which is, it's hotter than hell in here right now, man. You can't imagine. How the temperature, can get so hot in a small room so quickly. It's mind-boggling. So, did you know that? Did anybody tell you that? That the North Pole isn't the North Pole anymore and the South Pole is not the South Pole anymore? And they're like merging. I don't know. Is it somewhere in Malaysia or something? I don't know where they're merging, but they're eventually going to be merging. And then that's like they have this thing called pole flip, do you know about the South Atlantic anomaly, like the weakest magnetic area on the planet? And that our magnetic field in general has been progressively weakening and the weakening is speeding up. And it's a magnetic field of the Earth. And the sun has one that extends through our solar system, kind of like protects, its planet, so to speak. And that's been weakening. So the sun protects us from like general cosmic rays out there, but our magnetic field protects us from some of the dangerous rays of the sun itself, as well as cosmic rays. It's, in simpler terms, in sci-fi terms, it's basically a force shield, like a force field, right? And so our force field, our magnetic field has been weakening. And that's allowing, more cosmic rays in. And that's an increase in, potential things like cancer and other things like that. And so, and you have solar cycles. And, all of these things and solar activities, like, there have been some CMEs coming at the Earth this week. In fact, one hits today, but these things aren't major enough to take down anything. But, they will affect certain communications and minor things. And the satellites have to they've got ways of, kind of like protecting themselves, the newer satellites, when there's these outbursts by the sun. But, this stuff is taught to people who study, astrophysicists and people who study this kind of stuff. But the average person doesn't even get a primer on this, they don't even talk about that. So you have all these people matter-of-factually saying, that nor'easter was caused by, CO2 and human. And yesterday I showed you that the cruise ships alone, one cruise ship company alone, produced more pollutants than all of the cars, than 10 times all of the cars in Europe. They didn't bother doing the study of, the U.S. And they didn't include, that was one cruise ship company. But they didn't bother talking about all the other container ships coming from China, military ships at sea and stuff. And all these other things that burn fuel oil, bunker oil, and all these unbelievable deadly things. And have been doing this for decades and decades and decades. And like I say, the numbers of childhood asthma in the millions, hundreds of millions over the decades. And the same with lung cancer in the millions. I mean, I'm not laughing at that. Like I told you yesterday. I mean, one guy basically said, and he said it laughingly, but it's kind of scary. And they told us we were getting lung cancer from cigarettes. And here it turns out, over the past 20 years, this bunker fuel has killed something like 16 million, or it's caused 16 million cases of lung cancer. I think they were deaths from lung cancer. It's 400,000 a year, times 10 would be 4 million. So 2 decades, it would be 16 million. So if you take it another, a few years back into the 90s, since the mid 90s or so, 20 million people died of lung cancer because of this fuel oil from these maritime, these ships shipping stuff, for Walmart to fill the Walmart shelves. From China. Forget about the cruise ships. That's I gave that analogy that, this is factual stuff. This is actually printed. They haven't taken that down from their favorite Wikipedia yet. Well, that's a mind boggler. So, how many, maybe that guy, it's not so funny what that guy said. In childhood asthma cases in the 140 million, or something ridiculous like that, or 250 million, I think I figured out since the 90s. 250 million childhood asthma cases caused by just these ships. And they're talking about, in the U.S., it's we got to get rid of cars and, and stuff like that. And it's man, or the Europeans. Look, if a cruise ship's producing 10 times more pollutants than cars, 10 times more dangerous pollutants in the air, than all the cars in Europe, maybe it's not the cars you need to worry about. The other thing is they've been using this fuel oil forever. I mean, even through all the, like the world wars and stuff, but certainly World War II and in the 50s and stuff. So you could go back like 60, 70 years, which is when you look at the rise in cancer, and the other was cardiovascular disease and asthma and these other things that have happened, which definitely coincides with like this steady growth, because like everybody seems to be getting cancer and stuff. And it coincides with like, I hate, like I said, I don't want to say this. I'm just saying this because it's just too bizarre to think that if you could have something on the magnitude of, in 25 years, 20 million lung cancer deaths. In 50 years, that's 40 million. So, you take it to the 60s, 70s, you go back to the 50s or the 60s, you're talking like 50 million people dying of lung cancer because of fuel oil. Then suddenly you want to say, well, how many people died of cigarettes, right? Or how many people died of heart attacks? Because heart attacks and cancer are according to the CDC, are the leading cause of deaths in the U.S. No matter what, they don't tell people that. It's posted on the CDC side. I posted it here so many times. It's like pathetic. I got tired of it posting it. They're the two leading causes of death. And nobody talks about that. And like I said, to be quite honest with you, I wasn't even aware of this a week ago. I never heard of bunker fuel oil that way. I mean, I knew fuel oil as like people who had, like we had coal. When I grew up, we had a coal furnace. I used to have to shovel coal into the furnace and take out the ashes. Imagine that nonsense. But some people switched over to oil. And so when I thought of fuel oil, I thought of, okay, the truck pulls up and the guy with the hose goes and fills up somebody's tank in their house and they don't have to shovel coal like I did. And I don't even know if that was the same stuff or not. Right? But I don't think people have have furnaces like that anymore. I don't see oil truck. You don't see that stuff. That's what I was trying to say. The U.S., between our Energy Star appliances, all of the things that we put onto cars, and HVAC system filters and all that sort of stuff, that we're one of the least polluters and producers of carcinogens and that sort of thing in the world. I mean, there's still way more pollution being, put out, and things that can affect the atmosphere and stuff like that. But not nearly on the magnitude if it was, like, say, 60 years ago. And, in those days, they were talking about, like I've shown you on this show, it's a wrap-up show this week, early in the week. I showed you the Archie Bunker on Time magazine in 1973, and they were talking about the coming ice age. And then I talked about the blizzard of 77, right? And then, of course, the Great Flood of 70. Was it the blizzard of 78? Yeah, that was followed by, prior to that was the flood of 77. I believe that was Hurricane Agnes, too, which caused havoc all over the place and flooding up north. So, all of these things are just not, it's like they're forgotten through history, and people cherry pick, and then they put these things out, and these people, for some reason, have gotten jobs at the UN, IPCC, or NASA, or NOAA, right? Or are academics at these colleges and high school teachers, and they were taught this stuff. So it's like, it's not even malicious on their part. They don't know themselves. They read their textbook and they believe it. They went to college and some professor told them this. This was the information they were given. Or there was, like I said, they were lied to by omission. And that's how we got to where we are today. And then you look at today's news, that I had put up, like these, well, not just that nonsense, but things like this. So instead of getting to the heart of the issue, there's talking about traces back to Trump, right? Blame game. In other words, they're playing politics with something to try to, to skirt around the fact that true people are getting killed and this is a major serious debacle. And it just seems to me that it's all leading up to some point of some military industrial contractors making billions of dollars of profit on this. In human life, you're just cannon fodder. You're just pawns, right? That's the thing that's crazy, I think. So I don't know, it's weird. It's really weird what's going on. I know on top of this, we still have this thing with us that, despite the fact that I put up this kind of stuff. It's, you can't see it anymore because it's over there behind here is Mulder's poster, I want to believe, and the from the old X-Files. There's only so much room you have in the back, of a set, the so-called set of mine. But the one movie or whatever, the slogan, the truth is out there. Well, it is, it's right here. Excuse me. This is the truth, 30 frames per second every day. Every frickin' day I put it out. But, somehow they throttle this show. I don't know what they do. How it's so weird. Friend of mine puts out stuff and he's like throttled, I could see. But other people are saying all kinds of outrageous stuff and they're getting like 20, 30,000. I think the fact that is that these guys, these other people just talk. And I don't think they actually produce, they don't produce this stuff. They haven't written 9 books, right? They don't literally produce the images, right? They're not showing, verifying, through medical sites and things like that. They weren't, involved in expeditions to Antarctica and North Pole and stuff like that. So they're just talk. So they let those people, and those people are all monetized. So they're YouTube millionaires, or they make a living from it. I'm not monetized. They won't monetize me. Well, why would they? And I don't even, you have to have 1,000 subscribers to be monetized. I'm lucky if I have 26 or something. Maybe 30. I don't know what it is. It's ridiculous. I put these things all over the place. I post copies of it and I get comments from people. So I'm not even sure about the numbers, when it says you got 3 views or like a big video, like I think in the past week, and one of my videos got 13 views or something. 13 views. How is that even possible? But most of the videos got like 3 or 4 views. How is that possible? So not only am I live, right? Right now I'm live,
You're listening to Tony Caravan Live.
I'm live worldwide webcasting. Okay. But then this show is archived and available on my ROCKFLUX channel. It's, it's ridiculous. It's about the 240th or something like that show of this year. Like I say, I'm almost giddy laughing at it. I mean, that's how crazy this is. It's like, I don't know. It was like one of my earlier videos. It's like you're almost running out of things to talk about. But, as this week turned out to be, this was an interesting series, as we hit Friday here, come to a close of the show, more or less. This was an interesting week. The past week or so. It started with that Washington Post story about the thing being about 2 years old. So we were totally misled on the, what China knew and when they knew it and all that. And then the stuff about the lab and all this kind of stuff. And then you had this like major breakthrough, which really should have been the headline. And then you have, but at the same time, you still have this stuff, awakenings concept. And then you've got the Afghan war, and then you still have people pushing and trying to claim that something like this probably never happened when it lasted 6 years on top of, at the worst time it could have possibly happened. It happened when the economy, during the Great Depression. So, I mean, talk about absurdity and insanity. It's...
This is insane. This is insane.
Yeah, it's insane. And
this is a nightmare. It must be a nightmare.
Well, I don't know.
Why are you telling us this?
Because it's the truth at 30 frames per second, my friend. That's why. That's the thing.
Hey, buddy, how's it going?
Pretty good, I guess. I'm still alive. Think I'm going to end the show soon. Maybe now.
Good morning.
Something like that. Hey, thanks for watching. Nobody really watched it. 6:19 a.m. Standard Daylight Time. And visit TonyCaravanLive.com or RockFlux.com. For once, will someone please support the channel? Nobody else is. Nobody bought a single thing yet. Hey, this stuff is for your own benefit. It's not for mine. Anyway, take care. Have a great weekend. And I'll talk to you. I guess I'll talk to you, keep talking to you. Who knows? We'll see how it goes.